Alright, buckle up for the Battle of Kings Mountain, where the American Revolution suddenly felt like a Wild West showdown in the backwoods of South Carolina. This wasn't your typical battlefield. This was more like a you've messed with the wrong mountain kind of deal. Let's roll back to October 7, 1780 and see how this mountain fight turned the tide of the Revolution. So let's set the stage. The British were running around the South thinking they owned the place. After winning at Camden, British Major Patrick Ferguson thought he was a big deal. Picture this, he's strutting around, daring any rebels to come fight him. He even told the backcountry militia, many of whom were fierce Scots-Irish fighters, that if they didn't support the crown, he'd march over the mountains, hang their leaders, and lay their country waste with fire and sword. Basically, he thought he was a 1770s action hero. The locals, they were not having it. Ferguson's threats lit a fire under these rugged mountain men. Literal fire in some cases. They rallied up, determined to show him who was boss on their turf. Enter the overmountain men. These were not your average soldiers. They were frontiersmen, hunters, and farmers who knew these hills like the back of their hand. And they were ready to go full revenge of the mountain folk on Ferguson. The overmountain men weren't messing around. Picture a bunch of tough, hardened guys who looked like they walked straight out of a pioneer action movie. They gathered at Sycamore Shoals and in true dramatic fashion started marching over the mountains to hunt Ferguson down. If they'd had theme music, it would have been blaring. These were men like Colonel William Campbell, John Sevier, and Isaac Shelby, guys who didn't take kindly to threats. They set out in early October, armed with rifles, some basic supplies, and sheer grit. These guys didn't have fancy uniforms or the latest muskets. They were practically the OG survivalists. They navigated rough terrain, hunting down Ferguson's army with one goal: take him down before he could bring his threats to their homes. Ferguson set up camp on Kings Mountain, which he thought was a perfect defensive spot. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. The hill gave him a false sense of security, and he apparently didn't realize that the overmountain men knew this area like the back of their hands. But Ferguson felt invincible. He told his men that not even God Almighty could drive him off the mountain. Oh, Ferguson, you better be careful what you say. By October 7, the overmountain men surrounded the mountain, ready to attack. It was a classic "you're surrounded" moment, but with a backcountry twist. The stage was set for a showdown that was about to turn into a nightmare for Ferguson. And then, all hell broke loose. The overmountain men charged up the slopes, firing from tree to tree, rock to rock. These guys were snipers before sniping was even a thing. They used cover and terrain like pros, moving in and out, popping shots at the British loyalists who were probably wondering what they'd gotten themselves into. Ferguson tried to rally his men, but they were getting picked off left and right by the sharpshooting overmountain men. Ferguson's whistle was like a homing beacon, drawing fire from all directions. Each time he blew it to rally his troops, it was basically like a neon sign saying, "Hey, shoot over here, shoot." And these overmountain men didn't fight fair by European standards. They didn't march in lines or wait for the other side to reload. Nope, they just take aim, pull the trigger, and move to the next spot. It was guerrilla warfare at its finest, and Ferguson's men were not prepared for it. In the middle of the chaos, Ferguson kept blowing his silver whistle, trying to keep control. But control was not on the menu that day. The overmountain men closed in, and Ferguson found himself in the thick of it. Realizing he was outnumbered and outgunned, he tried to make a break for it. But here's where it gets legendary. As he tried to flee, he was gunned down, supposedly hit by multiple bullets at once. According to some accounts, he was the only British soldier wearing a checkered hunting shirt, making him a pretty obvious target. The mountain men didn't miss. With Ferguson down, his loyalist troops panicked. The battle was basically over. Some tried to surrender, but there was no mercy that day. The overmountain men remembered his threats and didn't exactly have the Geneva Convention in mind. It was revenge served cold on a mountain. In less than an hour, the battle ended, but the impact was huge. The loyalist forces were either dead, wounded, or taken prisoner. The overmountain men had achieved a stunning victory, and they'd sent a clear message to the British: mess with us, and we'll take the fight to your front door. News of the victory spread fast, and it boosted American morale at a critical time. It showed that even the most unlikely fighters, the backwoods men with no formal training, could stand up to the British and win. Kings Mountain became a symbol of resistance and showed the British that the South wasn't as easily controlled as they thought. The Battle of Kings Mountain is one of those David and Goliath stories that makes you want to stand up and cheer. The overmountain men weren't polished soldiers. They were regular folks who loved their homes, their freedom, and weren't about to let anyone threaten them. They came together, put their lives on the line, and won a battle that helped shift the momentum in the Revolutionary War. As for Ferguson, he became a cautionary tale. Don't underestimate the people in their own backyard. And definitely don't issue a mountain full of Scots-Irish settlers an open challenge unless you're ready for them to accept. The overmountain men did what no one expected, turned the tide of the war, one rugged hilltop at a time, and they did it with grit, skill, and a bit of mountain man swagger that would make any action hero proud. So next time someone tells you the Revolutionary War was all about generals and fancy uniforms, just tell them the story of Kings Mountain. Because sometimes history is made by the people you least expect, armed with nothing but courage and a rifle, and a mountain they die defending.